All right. So in 1875, this is all new stuff. In 1875, y'all, we pass our last civil rights bill until the late 1950s. Now, like a lot of laws, it seems like a good deal. It basically says, hey, it's illegal for you, for an individual, to deny anybody the right of a public conveyance. And then what does that mean? And that is full use of a conveyance. A conveyance is like, riding the little streetcar, which they now we're starting to have in cities, or maybe riding stagecoaches or any type of thing like that. Street taxis. They had, those. You can't deny somebody's service because of the color of their skin. Also, you can't deny equal use in public places. You can't say, hey, you can't come to this restaurant. You can't stay at this hotel. You can't go to this theater or whatever. And so these were things that were done. Sounds good, but it's really not going to happen, y'all, until 1964. 1964. And yet we tried to do it in 1875. And also, if you're a jury person, you're getting, they're wanting to put you on a jury, but you're black, we can't not keep you from being on a jury just because of that. Now, the problem, though, y'all, is there is no real heart to enforce this. Southerners, they don't support this, right? Unless they happen to be black or they're a Republican in the South. And so there's really no enforcement mechanism for this. So think about it, y'all. Let's say, some of you are driving already, right? You're out there driving your cars. And you guys will be worried about getting a ticket. I tell you, this one of the worst things in the world is seeing those little lights come on behind you, and you're like, oh, crap. This is going to be expensive. And tickets are expensive, y'all. They're in the hundreds of dollars now. Your insurance is probably going to go up. You're going to have all that. And so you and I generally don't like to speed, or we're really careful if we do. But I got to admit it. It seems like during COVID, and Mr. D will be punished for this, it seems like during COVID, I've seen a lot less people getting pulled over. So we've all probably kind of started speeding a little bit more than we used to do because the chances of us getting punished are much less. I say that and watch what happens today. I'll get a ticket on the way home, right? But the thing is, y'all, if you know there's no penalty, that nobody's going to come after you for breaking a law, people are probably going to keep breaking the law, okay? If on the other hand, I know, oh man, those cops are everywhere. They're giving people tickets all the time. I'm going to be careful driving. Okay. So that was the problem. No real enforcement. And sadly, y'all, there will be no Civil Rights Act passed by Congress for 90 more years. It's not going to be, I think, until late 57 that a very weak act is passed. And then finally, in 1964 and 65, there will be a real legitimate Civil Rights Act that we still use to this day. 90 years, 80 years if you count that other one. But a real one, a significant Civil Rights Act, y'all, 90 more years. Everybody who'd been alive for this one, making this one, were long dead by that time. Okay, so finally, y'all, we get to round 5 of Reconstruction here, okay? Sorry about that. That woke y'all up. It woke me up.
Adios, amigos.
The abandonment of Reconstruction. So this is what AP says about it. Now, AP, y'all, they generally don't like to give verdicts on stuff and give their opinion. Was it good? Was it bad? Was it enough? They like that to be more your job as the student. But historical scholarship on Reconstruction today is pretty much united on this issue, that Reconstruction started off well. It started off well, but over time, they chipped away at it, and ultimately it fails. Okay. Now, to what extent it fails, that's up to you. But understand, if you were to write an essay like, man, Reconstruction was awesome, man, give it an A+, man, it did great stuff, that's going to be a pretty hard proof. So really, it's a question of to what extent was there success, or to what extent was it a failure, okay? And they use this word, and I make a deal to have you guys write it, down what it means, the word is waning. Now, when something wanes, y'all, it is decreasing. You just don't care as much about it anymore, right? You know, your support changes. So notice how they phrase this. The radical Republicans' effort to change Southern racial attitudes. Now, you know, people have beliefs, y'all, and it's really hard to change people's beliefs except through education and through time. Just simply passing a law saying that's bad, don't do. Maybe people will follow the law, but it doesn't mean their mind changes. So that didn't work very well to change Southern racial attitudes and culture. Also, the Republicans, y'all, and this is sort of the kind of selfish part, they wanted to make this new South into a base for their Republican Party to make sure that they had control. Well, that's going to fail big time. And what we're going to get is a Democratic Southern base. The South is going to become this solid South thing. Why did that happen? Southerners resisted, y'all. They never gave up. They kept fighting in some ways the old Civil War and weren't about to let those Yankees tell us what to do. But also, y'all, the North gave up too. The North got tired of fighting. Now, I say that as a person today giving judgment to somebody back then. I really don't like to do that because, you know, what's the old line? Judge not lest ye be judged, right? No telling what people are going to say about the 2020s, y'all. I mean, I kind of joked with my sixth period yesterday, and I told them I'm a time tourist, that I came here back from the future just to investigate this crazy COVID thing. And, you know, I didn't really like to reveal the future and how it all ends. But it would be really interesting, y'all, to jump ahead, say 100 years to 21, you know, like 2120, and see what they say about us. I'm sure they're going to say nasty stuff about a lot of the stuff we did. And, you know, that's really kind of not fair to us. We don't know what they're going to know about things. I mean, there are definitely some things we could be doing better that I think we'll probably be judged harshly about. But you know, I think it's dangerous when you start saying, well, these people, what were they thinking? Didn't they know this was the most important issue of the time? What's the problem? Well, that's great. You know, I'm glad you can judge people from there. So there you see the phrase again, Northern support for Reconstruction wanes. Now, why did people get into this? Well, I think on your notes, y'all, I used the word bigger fish or other fish to fry. That's an old Southern expression where you're like, hey, I would love to be doing this, but I've got more important stuff to do. Bigger fish that I need to fry than to deal with these smaller fish. So one of the things going on, y'all, people were preoccupied with President Grant and the scandals around him. You couldn't go more than a couple of weeks, y'all, without there being some fresh scandal. And you look at this cartoon, which surprisingly, I know you're like, is that Thomas Nast, Mr. D? No, it's not Thomas Nast, believe it or not, but it does have Uncle Sam on it. Here is President Grant as a child getting his hands caught in the cookie jar. You know how, like, yeah, your parents say, don't you touch those cookies. Don't you touch those cookies. And what do? You sneak up there, you get on the chair as a little kid, and you break into the cookie jar. Well, he is literally getting caught by the president, or not by the president, excuse me, by Uncle Sam, by the American people, right, by extension, doing that. And if you look down here, y'all, here's like some of the other scandals and stuff like that. And he's about to get a whipping by Uncle Sam for that. So people were preoccupied with that. I think even more important, y'all, is there was a terrible economic depression. Now, you and I, we've lived through this COVID recession. I don't know what they'll call it in the future. They'll have some clever name like the COVID session or the Corona depression or Coronajum or something. They'll have some clever name for it in the future. Well, actually, I do know, since I'm a time tourist, I just don't want to give it away. But the thing is, y'all, you and I have experienced a bad economic turndown. Maybe some of your parents, maybe some of your parents' friends or your own friends have lost their jobs. Maybe they've even lost more than that. They've lost their lives. They've lost their businesses. They've lost their homes. And that's been going on really, what, about 9-10 months now since Corona really started hitting us in March. These people, y'all, had that and worse for 6 years. So multiply all the misery that you and I have been going through economically by 8. But also, y'all, there's another thing to note. Back then, y'all, it wasn't the government's job to help you. There were no stimulus bailouts. There were no payments to people, small as they were, and whether they've been really truly helpful, I don't know. But there were, at least there's something. There was none of that then. You lose your job, hey man, find somebody to help you. Get another job, find a charity. Maybe your church can help out. That was not the job of government. So these people, y'all, they truly suffered. So I just think when people are like, man, why'd they give up on Reconstruction? Well, they didn't have jobs. A lot of people had lost their jobs. There's also, y'all, a certain thing that happens where people just get plain worn out. Now, as I say, I try not to be political, but when our war when we invaded Afghanistan, y'all, after the 9/11 attacks, man, I was all for that. That was awful what had happened there. We needed to get the Taliban out of there. And I believed a lot of the intelligence information that said Iraq under Saddam Hussein was getting ready to plan a terrible attack too. And I believe it. I'm like, man, yeah, we need to go in there. But it's been like 20 years and we're still there. And we either have won or we have lost. And a lot of people, y'all, are just worn out. They're like, hey, man, I supported this Reconstruction thing initially. I supported these wars in Iraq, whatever, you change the date. I'm tired. I want it to end. Just like you guys want Mr. D to end up talking about Reconstruction. And we're almost there. But the thing is, y'all, there have been 4 years of civil war and then 10 years of occupying the South under Reconstruction. People were tired of their blood and treasure and people being down there. They wanted it to all come to an end. And I don't think we can judge them badly for that. You know, we ourselves have gotten kind of tired and burned out with our own wars. And in a lot of ways, y'all, Reconstruction was kind of Civil War Part 2, or, you know, it was just kind of more of that. Also, y'all, we had begun to really open up the West. We had been opening up the West when the Civil War happened. It kind of delayed everything. But after the Civil War, y'all, we seriously moved towards occupying that land that we had got from Mexico, as well as other land out west. Understandably, there are Native Americans, Indians there, who don't want to give up their land. And so there's some pretty vicious, ugly battles and wars between white settlers and the white cavalry and the white army, as well as African Americans who are out there as well, the Buffalo Soldiers, against these Indians, okay? And that obviously is a big thing. And then this is going to seem really petty to us today, y'all, but it was a big, big issue. In fact, it's going to be the biggest issue of the 1880s and 1890s, and it has to do with paper money and silver money. Now, it's going to take some explaining, y'all, to get this, and I hope I get it well enough to explain it to y'all. Okay, first of all, y'all, why is money worth something? Well, you and I can buy cool stuff with it, but we know that the amount of money we have is limited. You and I can't buy everything we want. We have to make decisions. I only have so much money, therefore I can only buy so much stuff. If you don't live that way, you're going to get in trouble, kind of like Mr. D and his credit card, but that's another story. But anyway, y'all, you know, you only have so much money. You better be careful. But what if suddenly you had a lot more cash in your wallet? Well, you would buy more stuff. I mean, and once again, it's a different world today because you and I have credit cards and we have Google Pay, PayPal. We have all these different ways to pay. But back in the day, y'all, you get your wallet out, you're at the mall, you look in your wallet and you got $5. And you're like, oh, great. What am I going to get for $5? That money seems really like, man, that I got to be careful with this $5. Maybe I can get an icy if I'm lucky, you know. But you look in that wallet and you've got 100 $5 bills. Man, you're going to be buying stuff for your friends. You know, you see Mr. D in the mall, like, Mr. D, man, you want me to get you something? I mean, you're going to feel very different because you, in your mind, you've got more money and you can spend it. Okay, so keep that in mind. And if that isn't clear to y'all, think of diamonds. Diamonds are cool. You know, people love them, right? And it's not just because they're hard and, and pretty, they're rare, right? Diamonds are rare. Now, if somehow we were able to double the amount of diamonds out there, what do you think is going to happen to the price of diamonds? They're going to go down. Now, in a way, y'all, money too has a price. We call that the worth of the money. It's buying power. So if you put a lot of extra paper dollars out into into circulation, people have more money. They spend more money. Money doesn't seem as valuable anymore. And companies start saying, I used to charge $1 for that. I'm going to charge $1.50 for that now, because that money just doesn't buy as much anymore. This is called inflation. And you guys have seen inflation. Think what the price of hamburgers were when you were younger. Now you go and, hey, it used to be $3 or $4. Now it's $6 or $7 or $8 or $9 to get, the setup that you guys want at whatever place. You guys have seen inflation. Now there have been some things that have gone down in price, deflation, but a lot of things have gone up. Okay, so this was the deal. During the Civil War, the North just didn't have enough specie, that is gold and silver, right? Now, people have always used gold and silver going back to ancient Lydia, right? I think it was called Lydia, the country, where they first started using gold and silver to buy stuff. Gold, y'all, and silver has intrinsic worth. If your country falls apart, you still got that gold and silver, melt that puppy down, you can use it. On the other hand, if it's paper money and that gold or silver, if it's paper money and that country goes away, then you can't really buy much for it. Like, for example, Confederate gold or silver, if you can find it, very rare, is worth the gold and silver or more than it is. On the other hand, Confederate paper money, since that government failed, it's only worth money as an antique. It doesn't really buy anything, okay? So during the Civil War, y'all, because the North was running out of gold and silver, it decided to really start printing a lot of paper money. Now, because the back of that money was green, people referred to it as greenbacks. They printed $500 million worth, y'all. That was a lot back then. Now, the thing is, this is great for a lot of people. All right, awesome. I got some money to spend. I can pay my bills. I can do that. And I hate to say it, y'all, but one of the things that's happening now during this Corona thing is our government, again, is printing lots of paper money. And I think ultimately, and this is my own personal economic opinion, ultimately that is going to have to lead to some inflation, because the money, there's just a lot more paper money, or there's a lot more money in people's bank accounts or whatever, because it's not all paper anymore. It's money in your bank account, money in your PayPal account, money in your whatever account, and you're going to spend it, and that's going to lead to some inflation. I think that's going to happen. And plus, if we're also raising minimum wages, as we're planning on doing, y'all, if the people you're buying stuff from are going to be paid much more, they're going to have to charge a higher price for what they're selling. So be ready for it and say, Mr. D said that would happen, because I do think it will. I hope it doesn't, but I think it will. So that's what happened during that time, y'all. They printed tons of paper money, and people who were poor, they loved it, because let's say I borrowed $500. And that $500 could buy a lot of stuff. But now that they printed all this paper money, that $500 might only buy before what was maybe $250 worth. And so if you're poor, if you're a debtor, you love paper money. You love inflation, because that means I can pay off my debts with money that's worth not as much. On the other hand, if you're a bank, if you're a creditor, and people want to pay back the money with paper money, you don't like it, because you're like, man, I loaned you money that, $500 that then could buy maybe what $800 buys today. But what are you paying me back with? You're paying me back $500 with some interest. I can't buy as much stuff with that money now as I could have bought back then. So you get really two sides here, y'all. You get the people who want the paper money. They want it to stay in circulation. Heck, they want more paper money because it's easier for them to pay back their debt. You have another side of people who are like, man, we don't like that paper money. Get rid of that stuff. Well, the trouble is, if you get rid of it, you do get what's called deflation. Now that dollar bill can buy a whole lot more. So if I'm that farmer and I owe 500 bucks, man, now when I have to pay that 500 bucks, it's going to be 500 bucks that will probably have bought a lot more back then. And also it's going to be much harder for me to get that 500 bucks. Why? Because there isn't all this paper money floating around. It's like if I were to take half of diamonds out of circulation, it would be a whole lot harder for any of you to find another diamond. And trust me, the price of diamonds would be much higher. The other problem was this. A lot of people had bought war bonds. And the way a war bond works, y'all, is basically, or any bond works, is you loan money to the government. You guys will hear from time to time that the school district is offering bonds. What we're trying to do is we need money to build a new school or do something. So how did that work? Well, basically, you have money right now. You decide to buy a bond from the school or somebody else, the school district, or from the government. The government says, thank you very much. We needed that money. We're going to use it right now. In the meantime, this piece of paper promises that we'll get you the money back with interest in X number of years. So you buy it, you help out the school, you help out the government, knowing that the government will give you that money back plus interest someday. Well, the war was over, y'all. 10 years. People are like, okay, man, I want my money back. I was good. I loaned you guys the money. And they're like, yeah, well, do we really have to pay it back with gold and silver? Or can't we just print some paper money and give you paper money for that? Well, people still didn't really trust paper money, y'all. I mean, today, if I were to say, hey, y'all, Mr. D has a $50 bill for every one of y'all would be thrilled. But back then, people would be like, paper money? Can I really trust it? Is it worth anything? You know, but that was the attitude. So these seem like silly things to you and me, although this may become very important, y'all, with all the extra money the government is putting out there for COVID relief. This may be a lot more important to you guys in a year or two, and you may begin to understand, oh, I see why those people gave a flip about that. So 1876, y'all, we get what has to be the weirdest election. And I say that as somebody who's lived through 2024. Now, also, y'all, man, you think 2020 was crazy? Wait till you see 2024. But I can't talk about that future election, y'all. I'm not allowed to talk about the future. But anyway, y'all, we have two basically good men, both of whom I believe would have been good presidents. We got Rutherford B. Hayes. Rutherford B. Hayes, Hayes, Governor of Ohio. For the Democrats, we have Governor Samuel Tilden of New York State. Tilden, Tilden, in case you're having a hard time reading that. Both of these men were good. He'd been a general in the Civil War, very good guy who later in life lived a very, very decent life, helping out a lot of people through charities. And we have Tilden, the man who had brought down Boss Tweed's ring, okay, and gets a lot of credibility for that. Okay, the crazy thing was this, though, y'all. Despite all of his problems, General Grant wanted a third term. Now, I don't think this is just ambition. I think General Grant was truly a public servant. I think he was a good man. He saw his country was struggling, and he thought he was the guy to fix it, okay? But the thing is, y'all, at this point, America had never had a president for more than 8 years. Remember, George Washington, after 8 years, after 2 terms, says that is enough, right? Now, his memory was failing. His health was failing, and that's why he did it. And it probably was a good thing that he did it. But from that point on, y'all, for you to say, you know, I think I'm more important than George Washington, I need a third term, was arrogant. Thomas Jefferson, only 2 terms. Andrew Jackson, majorly arrogant, only 2 terms. And so for Grant to say, you know what, I think I need a third term. Congress, they couldn't really say no to the man who'd helped save the Union, but they said, we're passing a resolution here, and we just want to remind you, General Grant, that we have a tradition here in this country. Some very great men, almost as great as you, have not ever wanted to run for more than 2 terms. Now, today it's a law, y'all. It's not just a law. It's in the Constitution. It's an amendment, the 22nd. You cannot be president for more than 10 years, and you cannot be elected for more than two times. Now, remember, a term is 4 years. 2 times 4, Mr. D, 8, right? But 10 years, how's that possible? Well, let's say you're vice president, something bad happens to the president, she leaves. You can do 2 years of their term, and then you can get 8 of your own. But it's the law now. Why did we do that? In 1940, y'all, as World War II was on the horizon for America, Franklin Roosevelt decided he needed a 3rd term. So we elected him in 1940 for a 3rd term. Then in 1944, we're in the middle of World War II, he decides he needs to run again, and we elected him again. But thank goodness he did the decent thing and died 1 year into it. So we only had him for 12 years. We could have ended up having him for 16, y'all. You could have started kindergarten and been in your senior year of college, and basically in your memory, 1 president. That's a long time. And so here, y'all, and this is, I think, a somewhat kind of sympathetic cartoon for President Grant. You know, here he is. The poor dude, y'all, is literally carrying the world on his shoulders. All the scandals, all of the rings that are happening, the depression. And not only is he having to carry the world on his shoulders, y'all, he's got dogs here biting at his heels. You know, they're snapping away at him while he's carrying everything. You got to feel for the guy. And then the worst thing here, y'all, is this woman over here. Now, she's got her back turned to him, sort of like, I just don't want to see this. Now, make sure you guys note this, remember this. You guys know Uncle Sam now. You see Uncle Sam, that is the male personification of the United States government. However, there's also a female personification of America, and that is called Columbia. Now, it's spelled with a U in the middle, not an O, like Colombia, the country. This is Columbia. Now, Columbia is usually shown as a woman with a dress, and she often is carrying a shield kind of like Wonder Woman's shield, right? It's got like, or maybe more like Captain America. I should say it's more like Captain America's shield. It's got like the stripes and stuff on it and stars or whatever. And so she's got her shield here, y'all. She's turned around. It looks like she's got her hand to her face as if she is crying, right? So she's literally ashamed, y'all, that this poor man here is having to carry the world on his shoulders, or at least America, that the dogs are attacking him, and he's wanting to do it for 4 more years. I remember this political cartoon in my history textbook way back in the 1890s, the 1970s, early 1980s. And here's President Grant, y'all. He's got the rings. Remember, whiskey ring, Belknap ring, all these other rings, y'all. And he is having to hold himself up by that on this trampoline, which is hard enough. But he's also using his mouth here, y'all, to hold another, trampoline line, or trapeze. Is it trapeze? I say trampoline. Trapeze here, y'all, that's got several more people, various people involved in his cabinet, people involved in scandals. And people back then would have recognized, oh, this is old so-and-so, and this is old so-and-so. But here are the people there. So you got to feel for the guy. And he wanted a 3rd term, but thank goodness he didn't do it. Now, the rest of his life is somewhat depressing. I'm going to go through it real quickly. He gotten tricked into a Ponzi scheme, y'all, where basically he put all of his life savings into this account that promised a lot of high interest. But it was a ripoff. What the guy was doing was taking Grant's money and everybody else's and using it for himself. And then as he would get new people to join, what he would do is he would take their money and send it to Grant like interest, like, look, man, we're doing great. Look at the money you're making. Well, the real thing is the money Grant had actually given him was all gone. And so when Grant realizes I've been ripped off, I have no money, he also finds out, y'all, that he's dying of throat cancer from his habit of smoking like 20 cigars a day. So he's broke. He's dying of cancer, but he's going to make it right for his family. So even though he's dying and he has to be all, cancer is just raging through his body, y'all, he sits down and he starts working on his autobiography, his memoirs, and they're amazing. And he knows he's probably not going to live to see a dime from it, but that they will make enough money, y'all, to take care of his family. And indeed they did. So a lot of respect for this guy. Awful with all the corruption and everything around him, but decent human being. Thank goodness he didn't have to do a third term. So what happens in this 1876 election? Now remember a couple things here, y'all. On these maps from the day, Democrats are red, not the blue they are today. Republicans are blue, not the red they are today. Did I reverse that? Democrats are red, not the blue they are today. Republicans are blue, not the red they are today. So when you look here, y'all, don't right now look at Louisiana, Florida, South Carolina, or Oregon as blue. They're not sure. Put question marks on them. Okay. Now, when the election was done, it was pretty clear that Tilden had won the South. Once again, African Americans, for the most part, weren't being allowed to vote in the South through those various means we talked about, but whites were. Whites were voting Democrat in the South, and pretty soon the South would be known as the solid Democratic South. Tilden, okay, won that. He also won his home state of New York. So, man, he has got every electoral vote he needs except for one. If he can just win one more electoral vote, y'all, he's president. He also has won with 250,000 more votes than Hayes. Hayes obviously has lost the election, it looks like. But then a weird thing happens, y'all. Louisiana, South Carolina, Florida, and Oregon can't really decide who won them. Now think 2020, right? You guys remember the argument about Michigan, the argument about Wisconsin, the argument about Pennsylvania, and especially the argument about Georgia and even Arizona. You know, Trump supporters say he won there, or we need to recount. Well, and of course, ultimately things were done, and things were checked, and those states were awarded to Biden, which gave Biden enough to become president. All right. The same thing is happening in 1876. They're arguing about Louisiana, Florida, South Carolina, and Oregon. Now, Tilden feels pretty good. He's like, I know I may not get all those states, but if I get just one of them, heck, if I just get one elector from one of those states, I'm president. I don't have much to worry about, right? He's really thinking he's got this, okay? But the problem is, y'all, these states, the Democrats say we won, here's proof. The Republicans say we won, here's proof. So Tilden is sitting pretty. He thinks he's got this election in the bag. Democrats have gotten the presidency back. They hadn't had it since 1856, unless you're counting Johnson, which really is different. So that's the situation. So how do we fix this? Well, you guys know we ultimately counted votes, recounted votes, and those votes were awarded to Biden, those states. What they decided to do in 1877 was different. They decided that they would set up a committee made up of people, 7 Democrats, 7 Republicans, and 1 independent, who would look at it and decide who had won each of those states. And then they would award that state either to Tilden or to Hayes. Tilden gets even 1 state. He's president of the United States. But then a weird thing happens, y'all. One of the guys, the independent guy, imagine the pressure on him. He's essentially going to be deciding the presidency. He decides, you know, I've got a better gig here, a better job. I'm not doing this. And so when he steps down, a Republican is named. So as a result, y'all, the committee has 8 Republicans and 7 Democrats. Now, I wish I could say everybody was fair and they really looked at it and Democrats and Republicans really selected the real winner. But instead, y'all, in every single disputed case, Republicans said, that's our state. In every single disputed state, Democrats said, no, we won that state. And as a result, y'all, state by state, they voted 8-7. Now, what's going to end up happening is Tilden and his Democrats, understandably, are going to feel really ripped off. They don't get a single vote, electoral vote, much less a state. They're going to start talking corrupt bargain, part two, the sequel. And if you remember the corrupt bargain of 1824, y'all, even though Andrew Jackson got the most electoral votes, the most popular votes, and John Quincy Adams finished second, what's his name? Henry Clay allegedly made a deal. I will give you my electoral votes, my supporters, if you give me a job as Secretary of State. People said this was the same thing. So, and down here, yes, it's a Thomas Nast cartoon. What else would Mr. D have in it, right? So anyway, you see them playing the new game, and it's like soccer. They're playing soccer, y'all, but it's with the ballot box. Literally, America and our votes are just being kicked around by all these people. So let's look at what ends up happening. And you can kind of predict it, y'all. As I said, 8 Republicans, 7 Democrats, and they're going to vote completely along party lines. Republicans voted 8. All 8 Republicans voted that each of those states went to the Republicans. Democrats voted 7 with their 7 votes, and every time they got outvoted. So every state and every electoral vote went to Hayes. It was the only way he could win this election. So imagine, y'all, you're a Democrat, you're going to be PO. You're going to be majorly mad, okay? It looks like it was a stolen election, maybe because it kind of was in this case, right? Hayes feels really, and I think Hayes feels kind of embarrassed. Tilden feels really ripped off. So Hayes, y'all, gets selected. That's probably a better word than elected. He gets selected as president. And here you see a cartoon of the time, not Thomas Nast. And I think it's kind of mean. You've got Tilden here, y'all. He's crying. I want my horse back. You stole my horse. Well, the horse is what? The donkey. Look at it. Look at those ears, man. It's a Democratic donkey. Here you see it, Electoral Commission. You got Louisiana. You got Florida on it. I don't see there's Louisiana, Florida. Anyway, y'all, and so Tilden, look at it, y'all. They're literally kicking him away. Look at that leg, kicking him away from there. And, of course, their hats are off. And so Tilden, y'all, for the rest of his life, will kind of say, hey, I was president. I was elected president. Call me president, right? And, we've seen other people like that. And once again, I'm not making political judgments, but I'm sure you'll hear Trump for the rest of his life say he deserved re-election and had it stolen, much like Hillary has said since 2016 that, hey, the election was taken from me by the Russians or whatever, right? It's hard to lose when you fought so hard. Now, Democrats, y'all, refused to accept the result, and they threatened to filibuster. Now, filibuster is very important for you guys to understand. The way a filibuster works, y'all, is basically you talk a bill to death in the Senate. Now, in the Senate, y'all, unlike in the House, you have time limits on how long you can talk. In the Senate, once you start talking, you can talk until you want to stop. And this has become a way, y'all, to keep you or to keep the government or whatever, the majority power, from doing something you don't like. So you don't like a bill, you start talking about the bill. And you talk for hours. And as a result, y'all, nothing can get done. The work of the Senate, therefore the work of the Congress, the work of the country comes to a stop. And so two things have to happen. Either you give up or they say, look, what's it going to take, dude, to get you to just sit down and accept this? Now, y'all might think a filibuster would go, oh, I don't know, a few hours or so. No, they can go for days. I'll give you one example. One man, Strom Thurmond, a Southern white segregationist, did not like a civil rights bill that was being considered by Congress. So he started talking. 24 hours later, he's still talking. Now, I know what y'all thinking, like, Mr. D, like, bathroom? Like, did he have to go? What's going on there? And the thing is, you do get some time for bathroom breaks, but you do have to, if you can, obviously we have exceptions for people who are physically challenged, but you have to stand. But you don't even have to stay on topic, y'all. You can read the recipe books, and people have. you can read the Constitution, and people have. There's, and it's crazy. Or you can get together in a group. I talk for 3 or 4 hours, and y'all say, well, yeah, Mr. D, you do that every day. But I talk for hours, and you point to somebody else and like, now you start talking, and you basically pass it around. There have been filibusters, y'all, that have gone on for weeks and weeks. Okay, it's a very powerful tool. And in fact, I make a big deal of talking about it right now because people are considering, y'all, the Democratic Party particularly is considering removing it as an obstacle. Now, there is a way to get over it. Let's say 60 out of 100 people in the Senate say, look, we need to move on. We need to move on. They can do what's called cloture, C-L-O-T-U-R-E. Now that you need to know that, but they can invoke cloture, which means, dude, you have 24 hours to stop this filibuster, and then you have to stop, okay? But a lot of people would like to get rid of it, period. Other people don't like that because they think, look, we need bills to have more support, and a filibuster requires a supermajority to end, 60%. And so therefore, if you want a bill to become a law, it has to be bipartisan enough, supported by the other party enough that 10 of them, if it's evenly divided, will support it. You have to have bipartisan support to get this to happen. But some people think, well, nothing's going to happen. Government's not going to be able to do what it needs to do. So there is an effort, y'all, to remove the filibuster, just as we already have removed it from when we're considering Supreme Court justices. Because it used to be, hey, I don't like that Supreme Court justice you nominated. I'm going to talk until you get rid of him or her and pick somebody else. So we got rid of it for that. But there's discussion, y'all, for getting rid of it completely. Well, anyway, Democrats threatened to use that and to filibuster until, quote, hell freezes over, to keep Hayes from becoming president, because they felt, very understandably, that Tilden had had the election stolen from him. So what happens? Well, there's not many things, y'all, that historians can agree on, but they do agree on this. Reconstruction ends in March 1877 because it is on that date or in that month that a compromise is reached. This is often called the Compromise of 1877. Now, what happens here, y'all, is a deal is worked out between the Republicans and the Democrats. Democrats agree to accept Hayes as the new president. But for 4 months, y'all, basically, they had caused all sorts of problems. Here you see General Grant, President Grant, there to say, to salute the new president, okay? And there you see Hayes taking the oath of office. But what does Hayes have to do? What do Republicans have to do to get the Democratic support? Well, first of all, there are only a few Union troops left in South Carolina, where the Civil War started, and in Louisiana, not Los Angeles, in Louisiana, where, with New Orleans. So there are still Union troops there protecting African Americans' rights. So basically, y'all, and this is the way it's often portrayed, is to get the presidency, Republicans sold out the African Americans in the South, right? That's harsh judgment, and yet that is one a lot of people make. The other one is this. The Democrats demand that Hayes, a Republican, pick a Democrat to be in his cabinet. Now, there is no proof, y'all. There's not a written document signed by everybody called the Compromise of 1877. But this is like the corrupt bargain in the sense that this stuff happened and rumors circulated, and it seems to have been true. And so the Republicans indeed do this. They pick a Democrat to be in Hayes' cabinet. They do withdraw the last soldiers there. And then finally, the South says, look, you've already built one transcontinental railroad in the North. You finished it in 1869. Iowa to Sacramento, California. We want one to help the South, right? Remember, there had been that big argument about where the railroad would be. Now, there is a transcontinental railroad built in the South, but it ends up not being part of this. So this part, at least, doesn't happen. So this, y'all, is done. And how close did we get to not having an inauguration with a for sure president? It was settled just 3 days before Hayes took the offer. of being president. Now, one of the things I have on your notes, and I know you're saying, Mr. D, you didn't tell us this part yet, is some nicknames given to Hayes. Now, as I said, Hayes was a decent person, and to his credit, he said, look, I know this election was divisive. As a result, I will be president for one term and one term only. I will not run for re-election. That's very admirable. But people continue to call him names. My personal favorite is his real name was Rutherford, Ford, B. Hayes. People called him Rutherford B. Hayes. Fraud, get it? Rutherford. Or people called him Old 8-7 because all the votes had been 8-7. Essentially, one extra Republican, y'all, on a committee had decided that Hayes would be our president and not Tilden. People called him, instead of the song Hail to the Chief, people said Hail to the Thief, or Commander in Thief, or whatever. So various people went there. And like I said, Tilden to the day he died really felt probably more justifiably than anybody in history that he should have been president.